Hey devs, April here. Welcome back to the Appian Community YouTube channel. We have new developer-focused learning content every week, so make sure that you subscribe and turn on those notifications so that you never miss a video or live stream. In this live stream, we'll be going through a few of the submissions from last month's Community Hackathon. After reviewing and talking through some of the do's and don'ts of good interface design, we'll announce the winners, so make sure you stick around to the end. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the stream so that we can answer any of your questions. So don't be a stranger. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to bring out my special guests, Christine and Jen. Hello. Welcome back to the channel, Christine, and welcome to the channel for the first time, Jen. Let's get started with a couple of quick intros. Christine, why don't we start with you? Who are you? How'd you get into Appian? And why are you excited about UX design?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. It's Christine. I'm a UX manager here at Appian, and I've been at Appian almost 9 years now, so it'll be 9 years next month. And I got into design in an interesting way. Appian was my first job out of college. I started off as a consultant, became a developer, and then eventually a UX designer. And along the way, I've always had an interest in problem solving and really understanding not just what we're building, but why we're building it and how we can build it better for our users. So naturally just became a great fit to end up in UX design. And so, yeah, really excited to see the submissions that we have today.
Awesome. Yeah, and we've had you on the channel a couple times before. If you go back in our past live streams, you might find Christine there, and it's always a pleasure to have you on, so thanks for coming back. And now a new face to the channel and a new member of my team, actually. We have Jen Higa. Jen, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hello. I'm very excited to be here today. So as April said, my name is Jen or Jennifer or Jenny. Either works, and I am a product evangelist here at Appian. And like Christine, I started off as a consultant at Appian right out of college. And then I went to go get a master's in human-computer interaction, gained a keen interest in UX, and now I am on April's team and digging into everything UX, understanding human behaviors, and beautiful design. So very excited to see everyone's submissions today.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so great to have you back at Appian and to have your eye here. And I'm sure this won't be your last time on the channel. All right. So let's jump right into it. We had a lot of great submissions to our community hackathon. And we've selected 6, so 3 honorable mentions, and then the top 3 that we are going to go through today and kind of get Christine and Jen's take on some of the things that they liked, maybe some of the things that could have been done to help elevate the submission a little bit more. So yeah, let's jump into it. So yeah, this was the community hackathon we ran. The prompt was to build a new scalable app market utility to help developers speed up their development. So, or something like you might see on design.appian.com, a little bit of inspiration to kind of help you get going. These were all of our submitters, so just a big thanks to everyone who submitted. And let's jump in with our first honorable mention. We have Y Connect here. Now, Jen, what are we looking at here? Give us a quick overview of what this is.
Yeah, so this was a very creative submission from Yexel, and it is a sort of job social posting interaction site, and you can actually post birthday wishes. As you can see, there's a congratulations and rewards, and so it's an easy way to interact and comment on your coworkers or other people's achievements. And so you also have a top contributors list on the right side, and it was a very great use case and interesting use case of Appian.
Yeah, and this is actually something we do have internally here at Appian. We run Appian on Appian. That's a little bit of a teaser for our next live stream, where we'll be digging more into some of those things. But we do have an internal kind of discussion board, a kudos board, those sorts of things. So it is really cool that with Appian, we're able to kind of simulate these other things that people are used to in their normal, non-work lives, and we can add some fun to maybe a business context. Christine, with your eye, what are some of the first things you're seeing here about how maybe some of the things you liked, and then some of the things that could help elevate this and upon iteration, help bring this to the next level.
Yeah, as we've kind of mentioned, it's really fun to see other applications that you're used to being built within Appian. And it's a great way to get inspiration right from what you use on a day-to-day basis. And so I think they've done a really good job at kind of capturing, that core essence of what we expect from a social platform, right? So you have your main news feed, there's a little profile, and then some, maybe metrics on the side. I feel like in this case, if you only have this little contact card and this top contributors card, you can even consider, consolidating the layout a bit where it's just a 2-pane. Right now with the 3-pane, we still are left with a lot of white space. And so that way, if you kind of consolidate those 2 smaller cards together in 1 pane, you can give a little more room for some of that content, add a little more imagery there. So for sometimes you have like larger media. And so, yeah, I think kind of consolidating the layout would kind of help bounce the page a bit better.
Yeah, I really like that that suggestion there. Another thing that I noticed is the red is a little bit bright, but if it's branding, I think red's good. And as we talk through all the submissions today, I'm sure color will come up a lot. But Christine, when it comes to something like this red, what are your thoughts about it? Should we be careful with how much we're using when it's a kind of an aggressive color?
Yeah, definitely. Especially with red, when a lot of times in applications, you're used to that being more of like an error, right? So you see red, grabs your attention, so you think maybe something's wrong. There are cases, though, when sometimes company branding does have red as their accent color. And so in that case, we just want to use it a bit sparingly and make sure that it's used intentionally. So for instance, in the contact card, having that full red background might feel a bit heavy, but still having that border color with red could still be all right. So just trying to find that balance, especially with some stronger colors that already have meanings attached to them.
That makes a lot of sense. Jen, I see that you have done a lot of testing here. In terms of feedback from the UX side of things, we notice up here, we have to like click in to then get kind of a bit of a template. What are your thoughts in terms of how to maybe make this a bit more user-friendly and minimizing clicks?
Yeah, so with UX, you often want to reduce friction unless it's an intentional friction for sort of high stakes actions. But in this case, it would be nice to leverage that rich text editor and probably have that at the top already there with perhaps that message of what's up in the rich text editor itself as a sort of placeholder text. And that way the user can have that full length rich text editor right there, and they can just start typing instead of having to click a hyperlink to then have that editor appear below.
Yeah.
But I do like the use of the birthday wishes and the buttons there that do make it easy. So if you can make it easy just even for sharing your thoughts or ideas, that would be a great way to do that.
Yeah, so kind of like merging these two things together. And then also the other suggestion before from Christine was to kind of blend the top contributors and the profile and kind of leave more space for the content. So a couple of things they could have done here, but a fun use case. I always say, when you're practicing Appian, pick something fun, pick something from, the outside of work world that you use all the time and try to make it an Appian, because you can build anything in Appian. All right. Any other thoughts on this one before we move on to our next honorable mention here? Nope.
No, great job.
Cool. All right. Next up, let's talk about the Credential Vault. Here we go. All right. So, Jen, if you would, could you please just give us a little bit of an intro to what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this one really stood out to me because of the clean UI, and this use case is something that I definitely could use in terms of managing all my credentials and tokens. So with this, it's a fully functional app where you have templates for all your credentials, and then you could also add a credential. So you might have an IBM cloud service, and it'll have the API key available. And when you add your credential, you could utilize the templates that you've created. And in this case, they they are empowering the user to be able to create these templates, and then for the other users to then use those templates to create credentials.
I see. Yeah, so we're getting kind of a preview here. What fields do we need? Whether or not things are masked for security purposes. So that makes a lot of sense. Maybe we can go over and kind of see one in action. So this looks pretty familiar, and I think especially when you're working across a team and using Appian, it integrates so well with whoever you need to integrate with, and it's can be a lot of credentials to keep track of and to be able to securely share with your team. Christine, what do you think about this submission? What's your first thoughts, reactions as you're seeing this?
Yeah, first, I would agree it's really cool to have this type of application to manage and create templates for credentials. I know that comes up a lot in certain projects, so really cool to see that in action. And what I like is, you're recognizing certain patterns that are really easy to see, right? We have the KPIs at the top, a nice record grid, so things that can come out of the box with Appian. And if you're looking for inspiration for KPIs, Appian also has a lot of different KPI patterns you can utilize. So kind of fun to see that in action here. And then with something like this, when you have a lot of dates and important expiration to keep in mind, something I would recommend is kind of being mindful of like the statuses. So on that grid page, if you want to go back, you notice we have one expiry date column and a status column, and they're both using colors to kind of grab the user's attention. But it may be hard for me as a user to recognize which one I should pay attention to the most. So for instance, a quick win on the expiry date column could be the fact that instead of having a color and icon for all the dates, just highlight the ones that are about to be overdue or are expiring. So that way I can notice that first and I can already act on that. And then if you go to the details view, I just had a thought there as well. So here it's nice that we are getting that detailed information about this DocuSign integration. And based on my permissions, I'm assuming maybe I'm just a user and I can only have read-only permissions. But right now with the details displayed in a disabled field, it's a little harder to read. So best practice is actually just showing read-only information as read-only text versus the user thinking, oh, maybe there's an action I could take to enable that field. So keep those input fields for editing, and then read-only fields for when the permission actually is just read-only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense here. I think that that note about kind of maybe even combining status and expiry date together, it just gave me a thought just looking at this a little bit more. Christine, are there any when we're thinking about using icons and using color and stuff, we're seeing like on every one of these columns there is like an icon starting out. What are your kind of thoughts around this, or are there any guidelines on design.appian.com around like not just color but also how much you're using icons?
Yeah, and I will say I think it's great they were trying to think about how to add a little more visual interest to the data, right? Because a lot of times you see grids and it's just text. So the fact that they're trying to think about how can I show this in a more interesting way is a good thing, right? You want to think about other grids you see in other applications and how they might signify users or expiration dates, etc. So, but you want to make sure that icons give meaning and are adding value versus just adding another visual element. So for instance, in the created by and modified by, you might notice in some grids, instead of it just being a basic user icon, sometimes they show like a user like avatar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know with grids, you might have to do a little playing around with how best to show that with our columns, but that's an example of adding value versus just showing an icon just to show an icon. Versus, the expiry date column, that's a good example of icons that add value because you're like, oh, I'm running out of time, or maybe something's already expired. So, just being thoughtful about if what you're adding is, providing extra value versus, you're just trying to add another icon for fun.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Jen, maybe I'll ask you this if you have any thoughts, and then Christine, feel free to chime in. For me, sometimes like when I'm working with grids, I'm like, oh, this feels like it should be like the first column, or this feels like this should be the last column. Are there certain types of columns that in general work better to be on the ends versus in the middle?
Yeah, I think that the ends just from like a psychology perspective, having the first column be one of the more important columns or like an identification column is usually the best practice. So if you do have something that is a unique identifier for the row, I would suggest putting that as the first column. In this case, it is using the name of the credential, which is probably the thing that the end user would want to see as its first column. So I think they did a pretty good job here, but Christine, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like sometimes, I don't know, for me, it's kind of like track list on an album, right? It's like, oh, that feels like a track 5. That feels like a last column. Chat, if you have any thoughts about grid column ordering or anything, feel free to throw that in there. All right. Let's move on. Great job, Credential Vault. So this was a Yexel submission. And now we're going to go over to a property dashboard honorable mention. This was from a team over at Mantic. So, Jen, again, please give us a quick overview of what we're looking at, what this is.
Yeah, so this is a property dashboard for rental property management. And so as you can see, it's very playful and colorful. You have all of the expense summaries on the bottom. And then if you scroll down a little bit to the property list, it'll have a visitor summary as well as a integrated Google Maps, and then a property list where you could click into one of the properties and it'll jump to the details for that property. So just on a first impressions, I know Christine will probably have a lot to talk about color and the use of color, but we could already see here that there is a lot of color going on. So, I would just be mindful of using color to express or display some sort of information and draw the user's attention to it rather than using it sort of just to jump, overwhelm the user a little bit. But on that note, I know that something that's interesting when I first saw this dashboard was that they allowed the user to actually select a theme. So again, kind of going on the empowering users to have a little bit of control over the interface. You could change the color of the background of this theme.
Ah. Yeah, we're used to light mode and dark mode. There's a few other options here. Christine, I guess maybe we could start with the color because I know that's always a big thing for you. What are your thoughts on having all of these theme options?
Well, I like that they're trying to empower the user and give you all these options, but the concern here is some of these background colors may not mix as well with the card colors, especially if those card colors aren't dynamic, right? It would have been really interesting to see if when we picked one of the dark themes like charcoal, that the card colors also match that kind of charcoal theming. And Appian actually has some dark theming guidance as well, and the card colors that we recommend for some of our dark backgrounds. So yeah, just trying to be mindful that if you are allowing themes, you may want to be intentional and only give a few. And that way you can also make sure that the cards match consistently with the background color as well.
Yeah. No, really, really good feedback there. What else are you seeing when you look at this? And not just in terms of like the amount of color and using color, but I don't know. For me, I see purple with money. Usually I'm used to money being like either like red or green. Like it's one of the two. So what are your thoughts on that? On like using specific colors for specific purposes versus kind of branching out a little bit.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this a bit with the last screen, right? Just being mindful that there are certain colors that people already associate with certain topics, money, right? You gave a great example there. And so when you're choosing colors, especially for this property and some finance information, get inspiration from other applications, right? What are some of the themings they use so to invoke a certain feeling, especially when we're dealing with something like finances. And but overall, I think this is an interesting example of how you can use cards to set up a dashboard and to really fill up a space. And so just being careful with color theming. So even as you drill down into this details page here, right, we have another like purple card, we have another kind of bar chart, and and the theming between like that purple and the bar chart don't feel as cohesive. So when you think of building an application, it might be good from the beginning to think about, what do we want our color palette to be? How do we want to use that consistency across the app, right? We'll use this color for this branding, we'll use this color for this messaging, and just trying to be a little more mindful of that as you're building out your application.
Yeah, one of the first things I always do when I'm building an app is oh my God, just lost my train of thought, is create a constant that has a list of all of those colors that I want to use throughout. And then another thing that's good about using kind of like a constant or a rule or something is if you need to change something, it automatically changes it for you everywhere. So like talk about reusable design. Jen, was there any other feedback or thoughts you have on this? I think one thing I just noticed is, I clicked into this, but I'm realizing there's not really a good way to go back.
Yes, that is one thing that, doing the trunk test, we've talked about it before, probably in the UX world, but you want to be able to land on a page and know how to get to and back to the previous page. So you want to be able to get to another page, the next page, and also know how to get back. And so having some sort of breadcrumb structure, or at least a back button or a back link, could be useful here, just because you have to click the owner dashboard over there to get back to the home page. So something to think about is just making sure that it's easy for the user to know where they are if they land on a page within the application as a whole, and having that holistic perspective.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Where am I? The trunk test, if you don't know, think about all of your interfaces like, oh, if someone threw me in a trunk and drove me into the middle of nowhere and I got out, could I look around and say, oh, I know where I am and I know where I could go to get to the places I need to go? So think about that with your interfaces. When I look at this, do I know what this is? And do I know how I could get to other things from here? So really good feedback. One other thing I would just point out is, there is this like card that's holding all the other cards. And I know sometimes we can get a little card happy. So it is fun using cards in Appian. But especially as we've added more ways to really fine tune those cards, making sure that we're being consistent throughout our application. So right here, we're seeing a pointed card with a rounded card on top of it. So just another thing in general with good UI design is making sure you're being consistent with the choices you're making, not just about color, but everything, right, Christine?
Oh, yes. Consistency is key.
All right. Any other notes here? Or are we ready to get into the top 3?
I think we're ready.
I think we're ready. Okay. So I got to be careful to only click once. Let's see. All right. 3rd place, we have Formcraft by Sanjitha and Sudarshan over at Yexel. So, when Jen and I were talking through some of the submissions, we were thinking about, okay, what things are like creative use cases, what things were pretty well executed, and then what things are the most like useful and reusable for the entire Appian developer community. So, Jen, can you talk us through, what this is really quick, and which of those categories you think this was really a strength for this one?
Yeah, so this was one of the creative submissions that we thought used Appian in a way that's very creative and interesting. And it kind of emulates a sort of Google Forms application. And so you could create a form from scratch or also use a template for the forms. And I think the template one specifically is really interesting. So if you click use a quick template, you'll have...
Oh, sorry. I just realized that I had saved this somewhere else, and it's using the nice new URL parameters that you have a lot of power with. So definitely check those out on the release notes if you haven't yet. So yeah, all right. Click on a template. Keep going. Sorry that.
The templates are great because they're actually using typical customer satisfaction and typical ways that you would actually build a form for. So it kind of makes it easy for the end user to be able to enter all the information instead of having to start from scratch, which is really nice and easy. And then if you click preview, it actually gives it in this really nice clean UI, and you could submit the forms that way.
Yeah. No, this is great, super helpful, especially now with portals. We are seeing, a little bit more, and even us internally. EB on my team kind of maintains a survey app that is used by the marketing department. But with portals, I mean, you can make your own Google Forms, you can make your own Survey Monkey type things, and this is a way to empower those end users again to be able to make their own surveys and kind of get them out there really quickly. Christine, what are your thoughts, reactions when you see this?
Yeah, first, I think it's really cool because you never know exactly all the questions or all the different types of, surveys that a user may need. And so to, like we talked about, give them that power is really exciting. I also really enjoyed seeing all those templates. Like when you know there are key use cases you feel like your users may already have in mind. Yes, give them that right off the bat. Don't make them work extra, right? Work smarter, not harder. If I had a recommendation, I would suggest actually bringing these templates to that main page already, right? So instead of having the user decide, start create from scratch or quick template, show those templates right away. And so then they can choose, oh, is one of these templates what I need? No? Okay, let me start from scratch. That way you reduce that click and you reduce one decision they have to make, and you show them that value right away.
Yeah. And another thing that I like about that, right, like, yeah, let's minimize friction, is also, I think it gives more context to the user as to what this page is and what I can do here, right? And that can even help us eliminate things like asking, hey, what do you want to do? Part of thinking, about creating good interfaces is this obvious what needs to happen? We don't need to talk to the user if it's an intuitive form that they can interact with. So I like the idea of just having 5 across, create from scratch, and it's very much, oh, I get it, I get what these options are here. So really, really good feedback there. Jen, did you have any other thoughts just on maybe this initial landing page, maybe on this kind of, they are using the new pane layout that we have just released, which is cool, but then putting this card in it, I don't know if we really need the card as well. We already have kind of a visual separation. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that with the nice pane layout, you could actually use the left-hand side to make it all one color rather than having a card within that pane layout. And also, since this has a lot of white space on the right-hand side, that might just add a little bit more of an anchor to separate the two panes. But I agree with Christine that it would be nice to have all those templates at the top, and that would also reduce some of that white space on this landing page.
Yeah, I think overall this is a really great creative use case, empowering end users. We love to see it. I think, yeah, back to the consistency thing I was saying before about like squared versus rounded cards. Some little things here and there that could help elevate this, but overall, great job to the team that submitted Formcraft here. I have listed somewhere. Yeah. Oh, I have the slide right here. Great job. Third place. All right. So next up, we have second place for card details. So this is a team over from Mantic here. All right. So let's pull this over. And Jen, if you would so kindly give us an overview here.
Yes, this is a really beautiful UI for a card details application where you could manage the financial information for different cards that users have. And so what stood out to me at first was the clean layout and being able to see the information with that sort of split UI interface at the bottom once you click into an actual user or customer. One thing that I would be aware of is I didn't know that you're clicking on Jane Kingsley, for example. So it's hard to really relate those details to Jane Kingsley unless you clicked it yourself. And so having some sort of way to indicate that Jane Kingsley or whatever row that you clicked on is the one that has the details shown on the bottom that would be a good way to either highlight it or have some sort of indication there.
Yeah.
But I do really love the way that the cards look at the top and then having some of the more details on the bottom side.
Yeah, it's definitely another way that you can be creative with Appian is like, oh, how can I try and like use cards and rich text to try and like create an image in a way, right? Like they're trying to like mimic the way a card looks. Christine, what are your first thoughts and reactions to this interface here?
Yeah, overall, I really like the overall hierarchy of the content. Like, I think it's very clear that you have this left pane with some metadata, right? So outcome statistics, timeline, that definitely belongs in more of like a pane section. And then you have your core content. And I can tell that I have like these 3 top cards of key items and then the list of items below it. So I think structurally, they're really thoughtful about how they want to build that out. In terms of other ways that they can kind of improve this a bit. So I know this first card is selected, but it feels a bit heavy that the entire card is blue, right? Mm-hmm. So it definitely catches my eye, but it brings a lot of weight to that one part of the page. So I'd be thoughtful about the type of selection style they want to have on their cards. And that kind of relates back to Jen's point about, whether or not that other card below it was selected, right? So how do we want to show selection on a card? How do we be consistent with that on the page? And then if you actually select that other card, I just wanted to point out another reason why you want to be mindful about your card choice styling. So within the details, you also notice we have another big blue card, but this one is not selected. It's just details. And so now you have these 2 conflicting blue cards of different shades. So just being a little more thoughtful about how, one styling could conflict with another styling on your page.
Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. Always Christine with the color comments, but it color is huge. It makes a huge difference. And one thing I noticed here is like invoice and transfer, again, back to like different money concepts being red and green. I'm not sure that it makes sense to use colors for these kind of like actions. What do you think on that, Christine?
Yeah, and especially with red, as we've mentioned, it can come off as more of like an error or destructive tone. So when I initially glance at the page and see potentially like a red action, I might think I'm doing something destructive, like deleting or removing. And so using more neutral colors for neutral actions is definitely the best way to go.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think overall, I really like just how clean this is, right? I think a lot of times this can be like, oh, how can we throw as much information as possible, but balancing that with, we want to still make it easy on the eyes. And Jen, I don't know if you have, just from the human psychology perspective, right? You were mentioning it before with anchors and with ends of grids, just in terms of an overall like first image, like first view. Are there any like tips or things that you think of when you're approaching an interface yourself from that perspective?
Yeah, I think that cognitive overload is definitely a thing where, we want to use our heuristics to be able to draw attention to very specific aspects or important information. So, like Christine said, with color, that's a huge way to do it, but also sectioning things in card layouts. I think that really provides a good way to have this hierarchy and allow the end user to have a cleaner way to absorb all that information instead of being overwhelmed with all the choices of what they can do.
Cool. Yeah. All right.
Also, actually, I wanted
to go for it.
I wanted to point out and give kudos to the attention to detail with the little favicon.
Oh yes, and yeah, up in the good point.
In the little tab, it kind of gives it that professionalism. It adds to the branding. So
yeah, I had that on my notes too. So thank you for bringing that up. I missed that, but totally agree. We have power to do branding. Let's do some branding. Even small little things make such a difference from kind of like the default, the Appian out of the box. You can really make Appian not look like Appian with just a few little things, which is it's pretty crazy. It's I mean, Christine, you've been doing this for 9 years. Like, how crazy is it to you how far UI design has come?
Oh, it's great. Like some of the features we build today, I think to myself, man, if I had this when I was a consultant, oh my gosh, that would have been so awesome.
Yeah. So really, you left consulting to help all the
Right.
consultants now
Exactly.
by
Mhm.
influencing those UI decisions. All right. Are we ready to see the winner here? Are
Yeah.
we ready? All right. In first place for our community hackathon, we have Split Grid by Jones and Somia from Yexel. So I would love to get into this. Before I was mentioning kind of the usability, execution, creativity, and I think this really is like one of the most useful, widely applicable kind of things that we can have. And I know something I have a ton of ideas for how I could implement it into some of my applications. So, Jen, could you please give us a little overview of what we're looking at?
Yes, so congratulations to the top winner. But this one, in terms of the category that April and I were thinking of, was that it is definitely one of the more reusable interfaces. And here we have the rows of different information, and you could actually click into one of the items without having to jump to another page. So again, that reduces some friction and allows the user to look into the details without having to go to another part of the application. So you can see here there's Jane Smith, and although the row itself also has a lot of details, when you click into it, you could actually see things laid out in the card layout again. So leveraging the card layout here.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, reducing clicks is one thing for me, but also reducing amount of times I have to go to other tabs because I don't know about you, my tab management is horrendous. So the more I can do to avoid having to open other pages, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll totally come back to this, and then I never do. It's definitely really helpful. So this is a really cool submission. Christine, what do you like about this? Looking at this here for the first time.
Yeah, as we've mentioned, I think it's just really cool to see an alternative pattern to that grid details view that we're so used to, where we, get navigated away from the grid, but then we have to go back to the grid to select another item. So really fun to see that we can see that those details in line, and kind of going back to another guideline we talked about where you want to be intentional with your grid columns. I like that for the location. We have that nice little visual aid of like the flag, right? So this is a great example of adding value with using imagery versus just adding imagery just to add them there. So I think
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun. And so, yeah, very fun to see this in action. As we said, like this is a great reusable pattern. I've definitely been in cases in projects where we needed something like this. So it's fun to see how they built it out. In terms of how to improve this pattern to really make it ready to go and be used by other people, I think just kind of thinking through how we want to show that selection on the row. So knowing that's the row I did indeed select, and these are the details corresponding to that row. And then along those lines, how do we get back to the default state, right? Once we start clicking on rows, it feels like there's not a way to just close it out and just go back to our grid view. So kind of making that a little more obvious, I think would be really helpful with this interaction.
Yeah, no, definitely a couple of good tips for that elevation to make this ready. Hopefully, we'll reach out to the submitters and get that feedback in and get this on the app market, maybe, so everyone can use it. That would be great. Yeah, Jen, what else did you like about this, or things that you thought, oh, this could be, a helpful slight edit to make it a little bit more useful?
Yeah, so kind of going back to the topic of color, I think they used color pretty well on this, so it's not overwhelming, but then the color for active and on leave are using our generic understanding of what a positive and perhaps a negative signal would be. So using it there thoughtfully is really nice, as well as the monthly attendance having the leave be red and then the full indicating with green and half being orange is kind of that stoplight color system that we're very used to. So I think that was done very well. In terms of something that could be improved, I think the filters could be put together a little bit more closely, since we have the sort on the right-hand side, and then we also have the filters in terms of the department and the location on the left-hand side. One thing you could add to make this easier is to have like a reset button so that all the filters are reset with one click. And also having them kind of closer together might be easier for users to go through all three of the ways to adjust how the grid looks.
Yeah. And also even with the consistency thing too, right? Of these two on the left are kind of like on their own, not within a card, and then the sort is like within a card. So yeah, there's a couple things you could probably do to like make this header a little bit easier to use and more useful. But yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty solid submission and a pretty reusable concept. I'm trying to just look quickly at my notes to see if I am missing anything else. Christine, did you have any last thoughts over here on split grid?
Yeah, kind of once we're talking about the filters, it made me, look at, the filters that are available, but then also the fields that are on the grid. And so whenever you are building out a grid, think to yourself, in what ways would a user want to narrow down the information on the grid? And how do we, provide those filters for the user? So in this case, we're looking at a list of employees. We clearly have statuses, whether they're like in or on leave. And so consider, maybe I have a filter to show me everyone who's out, or a generic kind of user search, right? Maybe I'm a manager and I'm trying to look for one of my direct reports and double checking what their attendance or weekly hours are. So being able to like search for their name. So just being a little more mindful about what filters you actually provide for grids. And I think that would be a little nicer in this context, so you can help people find what they're looking for.
Yeah. And to be fair, this is a kind of generated grid, right? It's not our out of the box grid, which we continue to add more and more like out of the box functionality to without you having to do anything, right? So they did have to build kind of all this out and build all this logic out, which I think really speaks to the power of Appian, that we have these out of the box components that are really powerful, that we make more powerful, but it's also Sail is a design system you can use to build anything like it with logic and with using the different components. So to be fair to them, short hackathon period and can't build in all of the out of the box grid capabilities that we have been building for years and years and years.
Very true.
Yes, but a really great job all around. All right, so I don't see any questions in the chat, but thanks everyone who has tuned in, and I would love to go back and just give another thank you to everyone that submitted and participated in this hackathon. I will kind of work with the community team to see if we can get some sort of hackathon summary out there so that everyone can go and check out the different submissions. With that, I think we are about ready to wrap up. Christine or Jen, did you have any last parting words? Jen, it was your first live stream. Thoughts? Anything you want to like share with the audience on their design journey?
Yeah, no, this was a very exciting first live stream for me, and it was really amazing to see everyone's creative submissions, even the ones that we didn't get to talk about today. So thank you all. There are some really fun things there that have inspired me to also think of ways to use Appian.
Yeah. And Christine, you've seen years and years of this. Last summer, we did a quick challenge as well that you helped judge. So, what do you think of these submissions, and, what do you want to see going forward next time we do something like this?
Yeah, no, and I always love being a part of these live streams. It's so fun to see how we're using Appian to build things that either we recognize or we don't recognize. So I just want to say to everyone, please keep building. You're inspiring us, right, to see, oh wow, yeah, we can do this in Appian, and kind of keep pushing that bar. And that kind of leads into what I want to keep seeing in these hackathons, right? Like you've seen already what has been built and out there, but like keep kind of pushing that boundary, right? Like, what are other ways we can use Appian to build things and to improve our processes? And so, yeah, always love being a part of this. Hope to continue to be a part of these going forward.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much, Christine and Jen, for joining us. Thanks to everyone who tuned into the live stream, and thanks again to everyone who submitted and participated in this hackathon. Our next live stream is going to be a couple of weeks from now, where I will actually be joined by our head of engineering, Suvajit Gupta, and a couple of other folks from the engineering department to talk about the Appian apps they build to kind of run the engineering department. So we use Appian internally. Suvajit's big on dog fooding, and we can't wait to share more with you in a couple of weeks. Jen and Christine, thanks again, and see you on the next one.
Yeah, thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.